Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. We have two monologues left in Sejanus' His Fall. Today we get to hear from Terentius in Act 5, Scene 10. And, you know, this kind of makes sense. It's Sejanus' His Fall, and Sejanus has fallen. He fell. In the earlier part of this scene, he was brought in front of all of the senators, and this letter was read out from Tiberius saying that Sejanus had actually done some bad things, maybe committed some light treasons and so on and so forth. So Sejanus was arrested and he was abandoned by all of his followers who are scrambling over themselves to try to make sure that they are in the good graces of Tiberius and also in the good graces of the gods. They want to go make some sacrifices, but they're not exactly sure too. And Macro was like, oh, I'm the new provost now, so isn't this wonderful? And Terentius and Lepidus are like, maybe that's not so great that he's... yeah, maybe we just swapped out one bad guy for another bad guy. But then Terentius came in yesterday and was telling us about what was happening to Sejanus. You know, he was taken through the streets and they went and they stormed Pompey's theater where his statue was, and they pulled it down and they dragged it through the streets. And he was maybe a little bit surprised by the fact that these were all the same exact people who had been following Sejanus, but they turned on him like that. So he was musing sort of about how quickly people can change their minds about someone. And Lepidus and Terentius are like, you know, yeah, Sejanus was very powerful, and these are the same people that were just kissing his butt, and now they very much are not. You know, they turned on him real fast, and they're like, what else happened? And Terentius continues on. I am going to say real quick before I get into this, the monologues today and tomorrow are a bit graphic, so if you have a weak stomach, you might not want to hear them. But anyway, Terentius, for those of you that want to hear it, says, sentenced by the Senate to lose his head, which was no sooner off, but that and the unfortunate trunk were seized by the rude multitude, who, not content with what the forward justice of the state officiously had done, with violent rage have rent it limb from limb. 1,000 heads, 1,000 hands, 10,000 tongues and voices employed at once in several acts of malice. Old men not stayed with age, virgins with shame, late wives with loss of husbands, mothers of children, losing all grief in joy of his sad fall, run quite transported with their cruelty. These mounting at his head, these at his face, these digging out his eyes, those with his brains sprinkling themselves, their houses and their friends. Others are met, have ravished thence an arm, and deal small pieces of the flesh for favors. These with a thigh, this hath cut off his hands, and this his feet, these his fingers, and these his toes. That hath his liver, he his heart. There wants nothing but room for wrath and place for hatred. What cannot oft be done is now o'erdone. The whole and all of what was great Sejanus, and next to Caesar did possess the world, now torn and scattered, as he needs no grave. Each little dust covers a little part, so lies he nowhere, and yet often buried. So this is, as I said, a little bit graphic. Sejanus, what he's saying is Sejanus was sentenced to execution, and no sooner had they beheaded him, but the angry mob came and started just ripping his body apart. People were taking pieces of the body and sometimes using them to barter with each other. And he's like, and it was everybody. It was old men, it was young women, it was widows, it was children. Everybody was getting in on this, and they pulled him apart into so many small pieces. Like, there isn't enough of Sejanus left to actually bury. Like, his remains aren't going to be buried somewhere, but a lot of them are just sort of scattered on the ground now and forgotten. So in a way, he's kind of buried everywhere. And Terentius and Lepidus are sort of like, yikes. And then Nuntius comes in, and they're like, what, you have more news of Sejanus? Like, we already know that he's dead. What else could there possibly be? So tomorrow we're going to hear from Nuntius to see how this all wraps up, because apparently being literally torn limb from limb was not quite enough. We've got a little more tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Mwah.